right? So again, all that moisture is going to cause the cotton candy to dissolve. So yeah. All right, so secretions, again, sweat. That's also a type of secretion, and guess what? It's also an innate defense against microbes. So sweat has an acidic pH. So again, things that have optimal, even our cells and even bacteria, they have optimal pH to operate at, but sweat is acidic. So if it helps to prevent the growth of bacteria and pathogens that don't like acidic conditions. It also has very high salt concentrations. So what does that mean? It's hypertonic to microbes. And again, hypertonic is related to osmolarity. So again, if you need a little review, hypertonic means that solute concentration, or for example, the salt concentration is higher than the inside of a cell. So if you have more salt on the outside of a cell, what happens to the water of the cell, inside the cell? Remember, water in osmosis goes to the area of higher solute concentration. So if you have a high salt concentration, that's going to suck all the water out of the microbes. So that helps to kill or at least impede the growth of microbes as well. And it also has these antimicrobial proteins called defensins. And also, it also has antimicrobial enzymes called dermacidins. So again, your sweat also has all these proteins that help to protect against microbes. Well, not only that, but sweat also helps to regulate your temperature as well. So remember, sweat has a lot of water, and water absorbs heat. So when you have the water on your skin absorbing heat, that helps to cool you off when you have a fever during the flu. So defensins, these are proteins, and what we have here is a membrane. So say this is a bacterial or viral or bacterial membrane. So defensins, what do? They actually embed themselves in the membrane of a bacterium, and eventually they can actually start to form these little holes in bacterial membranes. So defenses are actually kind of like this. So detergents, how do they work? Things like soap. Why is it important to wash your hands? Well, the thing is that the detergents. So this is why it's important to understand hydrophobic and hydrophilic. Again, you have the hydrophilic side in the cell membrane and the hydrophobic side of the phospholipids as well. So again, what happens with these detergents? Well, detergents, they're actually both hydrophobic and hydrophilic within you have a typical soap molecule. So the funny thing about them, that they can easily integrate and dissolve these cell membranes. So they also are like phospholipids, and they help to dissolve cell membranes, but not only cell membranes, they do work to extent on viral membranes as well. So this is why hydrophobic and hydrophilic is very important. So that's how so it not only works on bacteria, it works to extend on viruses. So again, this is why there's such a big deal about washing your hands. This helps to disrupt the membranes of pathogens. Now, how does ethyl alcohol and or isopropyl alcohol and those hand sanitizers work? Well, thing about this, ethanol is also a powerful dissolver and solution that helps to dissolve hydro or phospholipids and membranes. So this is how you're able, and not only does it do that, it also helps to unravel and what we call denature proteins. So this helps to also denature viruses and also dissolve their membranes as well. So that's why hand sanitizer works. But again, so this is the other thing. So on social media, this is the World Health Organization's formulation for if you have these ingredients, making hand sanitizer in mass quantities. But the thing about social media, they often get things. So they say, oh, okay, here we have alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, and glycerol. Or I've seen this online. So hand sanitizer alternative. 70% proof rubbing alcohol. But look at this. It actually says isopropyl, or back here it says isopropyl alcohol 99.8%, ethanol 96%. So this person said, let's just use 70%. But the thing about when you have an alcohol-based hand sanitizer, it needs to be between 60 and 70% to actually be most effective against microbes. So if you're diluting it with 2 parts of 70% isopropyl alcohol to 1/3 cup of aloe gel or whatever, you're actually bringing it down below 50%. So it's far from that effective 60-70% range. So again, do not use these homebrew recipes if they can't do their chemistry and math. Again, this is why this is important. So again, or better yet, Wash your hands. Again, washing your hands and these detergents helps to disrupt the membranes of pathogens. All right, so back to defensins. All right. I will get to thermal regulation when we get to the end of this lecture. All right, so what do defensins do? Again, they integrate into bacterial cell membranes. So what do they do? That does that do to the bacterial cell itself? So again, defenses are poking little holes. So what happens is that you have all these defensins. Here we have an example bacterium. So these defenses, they poke little holes and they form these little complexes that help to form a hole. And what happens? Well, all of a sudden, all of this stuff in this makes the bacteria open to its environment. So not only can its insides leak out, but also water can rush in as well. So if you poke in all these holes in the bacterial cell membrane with these defensins, eventually this bacteria will burst from all the water rushing in due to these defensins, allowing water to rush into the inside environment of the bacteria, causing it to swell, thereby killing the bacteria. So defensins they're not detergents, but they kind of act like your body's own protein detergents to help prevent bacterial and pathogenic invasion. So gastric acid. So again, when you have that prefix GAST, gastro, that refers to the stomach. So this is stomach acid. So most of gastric acid, the main acid in that is hydrochloric acid. So again, very acidic, releases a lot of protons and those again, aka hydrogen ions. So what does this do? It denatures proteins, but not only does it do that, denature proteins, it dissolves microbes or inhibits growth. So what happens here? Here we have our stomach, and here we have a bacteria. He looks very cheeky. He's like happy to be there, but he has a surprise. When he enters the stomach, boom, he has gastric acid. So what's that going to do to our bacterium? Yeah, that's going to wipe the smile off his face, and he's going to start melting. If he's not, and some bacteria, they do survive gastric acid, but gastric acid is also important in impeding the growth of bacteria that do survive it. There are bacteria that can survive a gastric acid, but we'll get to that maybe in a future lesson. And speaking of bacteria, so are all bacteria bad? No, there are good bacteria. So when you hear that term good bacteria, what do we talk about? So again, your body, you might have heard some other like classes or scientists say like, actually your body is mostly bacteria. And this is kind of, in terms of count, yes, you do have more bacteria than you actually have cells that have your own DNA. But bacteria are way smaller than our own eukaryotic cells. So it's kind of like, it's a little misleading when they say you are mostly bacteria. If you count every cell as the same, yeah, you have more bacteria cells on and inside your body, but in terms of volume, you're mostly your cells that have your own DNA. But good bacteria, so they're actually an innate defense. So they actually help to defend yourself against pathogenic bacteria that can cause other diseases as well. So what are good bacteria? So again, they're kind of like, well, I used to use this example. They're kind of like New Yorkers. They're very crowded. There's very big population density. But what happens if you try to mess around and say you're on the M line and try to monkey around? Well, they'll keep you in check. So they're there thriving. Good bacteria are kind of like that. They're thriving. But if you get out of hand, they keep or bad bacteria or bad bacteria. If pathogenic bacteria get on your skin, good bacteria that are normally found in your skin and not pathogenic, they help to prevent the growth and prevent the invasion of pathogenic bacteria. So this is why we talk about, we might have heard about the human microbiome or talk about your bacterial biome or your gut biome and all this. It's a very hot topic, but in general, what is it? So again, these human microbiota, you do have native, typically non-pathogenic bacteria that make it difficult for other pathogens to develop. And how do they do that? Well, they actually not only help to crowd out these pathogenic bacteria and pathogens, they secrete or produce chemicals that impede pathogenic bacteria. So they kind of lay their stakes down. They make it more comfortable for themselves, but it also makes it more uncomfortable and harder for other bacteria to get in there. So they also are very numerous. So that's just another reason why there's still more studies to be done, but There's often, like you might see in the news, they say like, do we wash too much? And why do we talk about, or do we take baths too often? And when they're talking about that, they're saying like, are we actually washing away these beneficial bacteria that help to prevent pathogenic bacteria from developing on our body? Are we actually wiping away our good bacteria? And they also compete for resources. So again, the bacteria and this your human microbiome, they also need nutrients. So the funny thing is that they also work to help us break down some of the food we eat. That's why you have a lot of bacteria in your gut here. They actually help with our nutrition and help to break down complex molecules. But the thing is that they also need food. But if there's a lot more of this good bacteria, then it's going to have less food for pathogenic bacteria to eat, and this make it harder for these pathogenic bacteria to thrive. And another caveat I should add, so good bacteria are good if they stay where they're supposed to be. So that's why sometimes this good bacteria can actually can be pathogens. Say you have an open wound and you don't wash it. Well, some of the bacteria that are in your skin, once it gets inside past the dermis and into your blood vessels, this can cause nasty infections that can lead to more complicated disease or your gut bacteria. So if you've had appendicitis, what happens if your appendix bursts? Well, it's going to release all this gut bacteria into your abdominal cavity. So if you have a ruptured appendix, this is why you're on antibiotics and why they actually need to literally clean out your abdominal cavity if your appendix bursts. Because why? All this good bacteria or that should be in your gut are spilled out into your internal environment, and it's encountering all these yummy nutrition, all this blood, all this interstitial fluid, all this sugar. So they'll go wild if they're not kept in check. So again, good bacteria are quote unquote good if they stay where they're supposed to be.